Now we can talk about whether or not it's cheating if you use the rewind feature. So let's talk. I don't know why this became a thing, but it blew up on Twitter from this guy, Mike Matei. I don't know who he is.
Yeah, Mike Matei. Mike Matei is basically the Will Wulff of Cinemassacre.
So
So
I
there's
know
the
this
angry
man.
video game nerd, and then there's Mike Matei is like assistant, his best friend, helps out a lot.
They
the
made
number 2 guy at Cinemassacre.
They even made a video about his tweet. Well, anyway, he tweeted, retweet if you agree. If you use the rewind feature, that's not standard on... If you use the rewind feature, that's not standard on many NES and SNES games available on...
No, stop.
I completely butchered that. You read it.
Yes. Retweet if you agree. If you use the rewind feature, that's now standard on many NES and SNES games available on the Switch. You did not, by any stretch of the imagination, beat the goddamn game.
All right.
He followed up. Apparently, some people took my last tweet as me telling them how to play their game, even though that wasn't even remotely related to what I was saying. If you want to use the replay feature, that's fine. There's a huge difference between beating a game and using replay.
So this to me sounds like a response to people or to somebody who was like, "Oh yeah, Ninja Gaiden, yeah, I beat that game. Yeah, that game I beat it on Nintendo Switch Online. Yeah, it was really good." And then you go, "Did you use the rewind feature?" And then they went, "Yeah." And then it's like, well, then you use cheat codes basically. You know what I mean? Like it's somebody. Right. It sounds like he's responding to a particular person who bragged about beating a game, or said it like as if he deserves some sort of clout.
Yeah.
But had a crutch. It reads as if he's telling people how they should be playing their game, and that's why he had to make a follow up.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about using the rewind feature? Will, what's your stance on rewinding or save states? Because that counts too. Using save states in an emulator or on the NES Classic or any of those
as
things.
Somebody who is not above using the rewind feature or save states or cheat codes or whatever, if you use them to beat a game, I could care less. If however you experience a game, like that's how you choose to experience it. Most of those NES games and a lot of those SNES games are hard as hell, and the only way to beat them is to use these extra features. So it's no skin off my nose. If you're in a competition, however, or you're trying to go for like a speed run record, or you're trying to meet certain criteria, then I would say using save states and rewind and cheat codes and whatnot, like that, then it becomes dicey, and then like you need to clarify that and maybe like be disqualified from the discussion in that sense.
So continue, please.
Well, I was gonna say something. If you think about it, the rewind feature, if we're talking specifically about Switch Online, the rewind feature, like that's built in there by Nintendo. That's something that they added to the game and told you about that you can use. So I feel like that's a little bit more legitimate than using cheat codes and save states, because those are not things that, the developers advertise. Those are not things that they necessarily want you to use. Whereas the rewind feature is something that they do advertise. So therefore, they do want you to use it if you need it.
Well, what about cheat codes that are in the game? Not necessarily a game genie, but one that's like
you have
the Konami code. Like the Konami code. Everybody knows that exists.
Right, everybody knows the Konami code. Well, they're called cheat codes for a reason. You're using them to cheat, basically. Yeah. I mean, the Konami code... the most famous example is in Contra. It gives you 30 lives. I feel like that's an outlier because you kind of need it in order to get through the game the first time around, at least. I know there are people who can beat Contra without the Konami code, but you probably needed it the first time around just to get like the lay of the land and stuff.
So here's the way I view it. I beat Mega Man 3 back in the day on the NES, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I use the freaking Game Genie.
Yes.
And whenever I talk about how I played Mega Man 3 for the NES and how I beat it for the NES back in the day, I say I beat it, but I use the Game Genie.
Right.
I always specify that.
Mhm.
You know? If I'm gonna, I think I did. What did I beat? I beat something else through an emulator, and I also clarified that I used save states because that I'm always gonna clarify I beat this game, but I use save states. You know, I'm never gonna say, oh yeah, I beat that game, because I don't want people to think that I did it on my own accord. There's also some games that it's just easier to use save states because it saves you time, not necessarily like it helps you too much. It's just that I know I can get through this part. It's just annoying to have to do all of that again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But still, I would still clarify that I use save states. When I was playing through Super Mario World on Twitch recently, the whole chat was mad that I wasn't using the rewind feature.
Really?
And I was like, no, I want to beat it legit because I've never 100%ed Super Mario World, so I want to do it legit. And I want to be able to say that I did it, you know, without using save states. When I played through Pokemon Yellow on Twitch, I would use save states as a backup, but I never used it as like a crutch or like a rewind. One time I accidentally hit quick load, and it cost me about an hour and a half, and that was very upsetting. But anyway, my point is, it's okay to play the game however you want. I used to use Game Genie for some games. I still use save states for some games because I don't care. Ninja Gaiden's hard as hell. I'm going to use save states for that. I used the special version too when I was practicing for that NES tournament, just so you can just start at the end of the game. There's nothing wrong with playing the game however you want. However, don't be bragging about beating a game if you're using save states. You got to clarify that you use the save states. That's my point of view.
I feel like it's less about like, don't be bragging about beating the game using save states and rewind. It's more so, don't shame people who beat the game using rewind and save states and whatnot, because not everybody's as good as you. You know, I mean, some people want to experience a game as easily as possible, and not everybody, you know, can beat Sonic 2 blindfolded while just listening to the audio and timing their jumps that way.
Well, back in the day, like these days, beating a game isn't really like a feat. Like you don't go to the schoolyard and go, "Oh, I beat that game. Yeah, it was great." No. Nobody cares that you beat a game these days because it just means that you had 20 hours to dump into a game. Back in the day, like in the NES and the SNES, when you beat a game, it was an accomplishment because those games, most of them, were hard as hell. So I think that's what Mike Matei over here is getting at, is that it's you're taken away from the accomplishment if you're using save states or the rewind feature. But if you go over to the schoolyard and say, yeah, I beat Ninja Gaiden.
Well, then in that case, if they want to go that route, then I guess would it be acceptable to say I made it to the end of Ninja Gaiden, I used cheat codes and save states and rewind in order to help me do that. So, but then you have to teach a whole nother terminology and nobody wants to learn that. So
I'm just saying it's a clarifier that needs to be spoken on in some cases.
Yeah.
So I get what he's getting at, but at the same time, it's a little abrasive because it's really not that big of a deal if somebody wants to use save states. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just happy people get to experience all of these games however they can.
Yeah.
Ninja Gaiden's a very hard game. If you got to use save states to go through it, be my guest. Mega Man 3 is a very hard game. I used freaking Game Genie because I couldn't do it back in the day. I probably still couldn't do it.
I proudly say that when I play Comic Zone, I use cheat codes because otherwise there'd be no way to beat that game. There really wouldn't be. You know, some games require it, some games don't.
I think I used save states the first time I beat Mega Man X.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the official stance here? Is it use save states if you want? but make sure you clarify.
Play the game however you want. Clarify it if you feel like you need to. If anybody shames you for playing a game the way you want it to
Punch
play
him in
it,
the face.
yeah, just punch him in the face.
Dan Kaz in the chat says, it's about bragging. It's also about lying to yourself, not being willing to be challenged, not overcoming adversity, lacking perseverance. This man thinks there's like a pot of gold at the end of Ninja Gaiden. That's a little much. but we're also just kind of assuming that this conversation was brought up because somebody bragged about beating a really hard game.
Yeah.
It could also just be Mike Matei over here just beating Ninja Gaiden himself or something, or Contra, and then being like, other people use save states and they say they beat the game, and just making up a whole bunch of garbage. So it could literally be anything. We're just, I guess, introducing some scenarios where it could be one way and some scenarios where it could be the other way.